Welcome. Thanks, guys.
Take it away. Y'all can hear me? Us? We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so first things first, it's good to actually see people in the room. When I was looking at the schedule, there's a lot of really, really good talks, and I felt a little amateurish because I was like, we're the ones doing the printer talk? Like, who gives a shit about printers, really? But that was one of the reasons we wanted to do this. Regardless of what your opinions are about the best brand of phone or the best operating system or the best anything, printers are that one thing we can all unite behind and be like, these things suck. So we're going to add a whole bunch of pile to that suck. And secondly, on a serious note, like printers are a part of all of us, all of our environments. We all have them, we use them. Heck, there's a multifunction printer just on floor 2 outside this building. After you see our talk, you're going to walk by that and be like, wrecked. So that's kind of our intro here. So how we got to doing this. Back in like February, someone I work with canceled a meeting, which meant I suddenly had an hour of free time, which was quite rare. And I had to do a whole bunch of paperwork. And I ended up printing something. And we use this thing, it's called Secure Print, where you have a pin, right? You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever is your debit card, the same thing. And when you send your print job to the printer doesn't automatically print it. If you use Secure Print, the printer holds onto it until you enter your pin. Then it releases it. And if you're going to use a product that has the word secure in the title, and you give someone on my team an hour of free time, we're going to have quite a bit of fun with it. So we're going to talk today about some practical attacks against printers. There's no theory today. Everything we're talking about, we've done. You can do it too. Sometimes it's a matter of just spending $60 on the internet and having a go with it. But real quick intro, if you want to learn more about the bullet points, just find me later. I'm not going to go through it, but I do want to highlight the bottom one here, Total plug to the home team. Nate, alumni as well, graduated from the computer network admin course back in 2008. Honestly, it was a great course. It taught me so much stuff. It humbled me like crazy. I went into that course being like, I know everything about computers. And a week later, I was like, I know jack shit about computers. I'm also on the BASed advisory program. What is the BASed advisory group, council membership, whatever. It's industry advisors who advise Nate on the course of some of their projects.
And there we go. Okay, cool. Sorry, this is my very first presentation, so just bear with me. Thank you, I appreciate that. So I'm Zoe, I work at SecureNet Solutions. We're a small little company based out of Calgary. It's just sometimes Michael likes to throw stuff in the YXX Slack, and I'm like, cool, a puzzle. I've also done some work with Renderman's Internet of Dongs project, where he did some security auditing on internet-connected sex toys, so that's what DVEs are. I do not have any CVEs yet. But you should also check out that talk tomorrow afternoon. He's doing a whole talk on a bunch of things, and that is in there. And allegedly, I can fit 16 marshmallows in my mouth. There's no video or photo evidence, and I don't know how that is, because we all have smartphones, and when someone says, hold my beer, I'm going, oh, let me get my phone first. You know, make sure I get this on record.
So if anybody actually has 16 marshmallows, find us later, because there's something we need to settle together.
And also, I will be leaving right after this talk, so, you know.
All right, so here's how we got here, or the quick agenda for today. We'll just do a little bit of discussion, get everyone on the same page around printers and what our general knowledge is. Encrypt all the things. Yeah, we know encryption's important. We're going to show you guys what happens when you don't encrypt your print jobs, which I would bet very many of you are not doing. And then we're going to show you what happens when you encrypt them very, very poorly, and we come in and start decrypting your shit. And then we're going to show you why you want to encrypt it. String reuse equals DDoS. That's a whole section about how your multifunction printers can DDoS stuff, because why the hell not? Stealing domain creds. We're going to focus on stealing domain creds, but really we could title that just stealing credentials for all sorts of services using printers. And then the good news is we do have solutions for all of this. This is not one of those talks where we're just going to mic drop, walk away, and cause panic in the streets. This stuff is actually quite simple to prevent. It's just from my experience and Zoe's experience. People just aren't doing this, so that's okay. And then the last thing, I was told I have to put this slide in here from my employer. I work at the U of A. And one particular vendor that we use was like, just if you're going to throw us under the bus, do so politely. It's not a vendor bash at all. The intent of this presentation is to build each other up, not put each other down. We're here to show you guys some interesting issues with printers. And the whole point of this talk is, I know for a fact there's one person in this audience, because they told me earlier, their boss said to them, yeah, you can go to BSides Edmonton under one condition, and that's that you bring something back practical from that conference that we can do in our environment. So this talk, you know who you are, and this talk's right for you, because that's what this is. This is practical stuff. You can write this down and be like, hey, we should probably look at our printers, because there's some fun stuff there. What else did I have here? That was it. So just a little bit of audience participation. I hate audience participation, so I'm going to force all of you to do it. Sanity check. Just raise your hand if you've ever successfully canceled a print job. Who's actually done it? A few of you. Okay. What do you think of that?
I think you're all liars. I mean, there was one time where I almost managed to, where I thought I had canceled a print job, and like a week later my power blipped, and that cheeky little printer just fired out that job from a week ago. And trying to go to your therapist to talk about how your printer is gaslighting you just is a little bit weird. She just says, step away from the machines, which is just good life advice in general, I think, in our industry. But
good idea.
Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion that being able to cancel a print job is a superpower. And if you only have one superpower, like you could have got flight, invincibility. No, you got the ability to cancel a print job, so that really sucks.
And how many of you know what PC load letter means? And how many of you know that from Office Space or the actual documentation? Because apparently it's print carriage load letter paper. But
they could have just said stick paper in me. They'd say that, but.
No.
All right, here's a fun one. How many of you, raise your hand if someone has changed your multifunction printer display to something inappropriate on April Fool's Day? That actually happened. I kid, one person, woo, we can have beer later together. I don't drink, but whatever. This actually happened a couple years ago. You can find it online. There was someone out there, either they used Shodan or they scanned the entire internet, and they found a couple thousand IP addresses with public JetDirect ports open. And the early mornings of April Fool's Day, when we were all sleeping, they ran a script that changed where it worked, the display to something like you've been hacked or something. And I came into work and someone was like, oh my gosh, someone got into our printer. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever, because awesome.
And how many of your multifunctions have actually DDoSed European Counter-Strike servers?
I see Kirk putting his hand up. You work at the U of A, you put your hand up. Yeah, we call that Tuesday, to quote Kirk. Well, that's a whole portion of the talk later. So one thing that I want to talk about is 4 steps to guarantee failure. A lot of what we've looked at when it came to these printers is there was this common theme in the last 6 months, talking to people, fixing stuff, and to summarize it, it was this. It was, oh, that doesn't work the way we thought it did. Or, oh, that wasn't configured the way we thought it was configured. And what I've learned, so I work very large enterprise. People, departments, teams, vendors, contracts, people. There's a lot of people involved in decision making, going basically from like conception to actual implement and operate. And do you guys remember the telephone game? Did you ever play it as a kid where they'd stick you in a group and one person would say something like a guppy in a shark tank, and then the person would whisper it and they'd whisper it, and then the last person would have to say what they heard, and it would be something like a puppy in the park stinks. I got that from the internet. Right? And the point is, it's like each person kind of hears something and says something a little differently, and then over time it changes. And I had a coworker tell me, they're like, we do that all the time, we just call it waterfalling. And I was like, that's actually really funny. But here's what we learned with one particular vendor. They literally gave me step 1, and I was like, oh, I'm going to run with this. So engineering comes up with a feature, and they say, we have this new feature to solve problem X. It does not solve problem Y or Z. It just solves problem X. And then they give it to marketing. No offense to the marketing folks. And marketing says, we're first to market for feature X. Attend this webinar to learn about X, Y, and learn all about feature Y. If you spend like 20 seconds on LinkedIn, step 2, you see all over the place. And then the customer goes, hey, this webinar just showed us how to solve problem Y, Z. We have Z all over the place. We should attend the webinar. And then step 4 happens. So they buy feature X. They accidentally use it to solve problem Z, and everything's right with the world until Zoe and I come knocking with our fun little tools, and no, that's not what happened. So we have 3 examples for today that we want to show you guys. There's a lot of stuff we could have talked about with multifunction print security, but just time constraints and whatnot. We focused on these ones. So we're going to show you guys a complete reversing of one particular secure print implementation. We're going to talk about SNMP management and how you can abuse the hell out of that with printers. And then we're going to talk about, we call it scan to folder. That's kind of where we look at actually abusing, like stealing credentials and what have you. So, real quick, does anybody here use secure print? Pins to print your stuff, or do you just print and it shows up on the printer and you hope someone else doesn't have it? So if you don't use secure print, this is what it is. It's a feature you can enable in any modern print driver that when you print, it asks you what do you want for a pin, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. It sends that along with the print job. When you get to the printer, it will not release the job until you enter your actual pin. The problem is that it has the word secure in it. And what it's not secure. There is absolutely nothing secure about secure print at all. And Zoe and I are going to demonstrate this. So what we did is we captured a print job, actually a whole bunch of them, and we started looking at what exactly is in a secure print-enabled print job on the wire. And Zoe's going to take it from here.
So here's a small sample from just one print job that we captured. So we have lots of really interesting information, like we know the program that issued the print job, so we know it's Word. We've got Spaling's username, which is quite handy because if you can find out username format for an enterprise if you get one. The computer name, Excelsior, nerd.
That's a starship, but that's not the sword.
See, I didn't know that.
That's the starship class, yeah, from Star Trek.
Okay, that's good to know because I'm not a Trekkie.
If you see like Sovereign and Defiant, you can tell my naming convention.
Okay. And but the big one is job password. That's the one that stood out to me. So yeah, the job password looks a little bit short for a password. And one of the other things is you can also, I believe in your environment, you found, in one of your packet captures, you found like someone printing with the domain address.
Yeah, I was capturing something with someone with their permission, and what they actually had as their username was their last name .admin. And I was like, oh, now I know, and I didn't know what username they were using. We're like, oh, now we know your administrative naming convention. So if you can get a foothold in an environment where you can just start ripping out print jobs, which is really easy to do, we'll show you that there is an absolute wealth of information in these packets that can help you enumerate.
And like, when it comes to pen testing, like enumeration is the biggest thing. So I love all that data. So we worked with some of the pins. We entered a few pins to see what the job password looked like. So for the pin 4321, we got 44, 58, 56, 54. An odd size, that's for sure. Each character, each pin number. So pins can actually be alphanumeric. They don't need to be just numeric. Just for simplicity's sakes, they are just numeric here. So we have a pin of, so for 4 we have 44. So we tried doing a reverse. So instead of doing 4321, we did 1234. We didn't get something that looked like a substitution cipher, so we can rule that out. And we also noticed that the job password grows the exact same length that's dependent on the length of the pin. So we know if there's a 20-character job password, it's a 10-character pin. If it's a 10-character job password, it's a 5-character pin. That doesn't sound like any sort of good encryption that I've heard of, but I'm not a cryptographer, so I had a gut feeling that it had something to do with Azure, but how do I figure it out? Well, I did the first couple by hand, but then I got lazy because I'm very lazy. So I dug into the Android APK. So I've done a little bit of Android stuff before, mostly working with Render's Internet of Dongs project. And the great thing about Android APKs is they're basically jars, so Java jar files, and because they're bytecode, we can decompile them really easily. I am not Josh. I cannot stare at assembly day in and day out, and I see assembly and I just nope out of there. Like, not for me. So in an Android APK, you quite often have any of your standard file archive, file, unzippy things, WinRAR, that. You'll see a few different files like libraries, asset files, but there's one main one, and that is the classes.dex. And that is like that's where all the nice stuff lives. That's like the white stuff in an Oreo. You can just throw away everything else because really like the white stuff is.
Hold on, I love the.
Why
would you throw out the brown part of the Oreo?
Your taste in Oreo is objectively incorrect, and I can prove it, but we'll do that later.
You guys got those marshmallows? I'm gonna just throw them at it now. Forget you know.
Bring it on. So yeah, lots of tools. The nice thing too is because it's just straight Java, there's tons of Java tools out there that will decompile these classes.dex files. And when you do that, you get nice little class files, and it looks very similar to the source. It's not exactly the source, but it's good enough. And the nice thing is that like nobody strips or obfuscates these Android files, these APK files. There has been one instance, and that was in one of Render's projects after we recommended to them to run it through an obfuscator. And when I see the obfuscated stuff, I'm just like, nah, I'm off hours. I'm too lazy for that. So it's a good way to get rid of the lazy researchers.
Can I add one thing real quick?
Yeah.
So one of the key things just with the Android APKs and stuff is if your device, like your Windows-based laptop, can do the exact same thing that your Android-based phone can do, find the APK that's doing it and rip it out. What happened in this case is the print drivers for the vendor that we were using that was on here, they also make an Android print driver. And when we were like, well, hey, hold on a second, we're pretty sure we can figure out how the secure print thing is working. Yeah, there's feature parity there. So we'll say if you have feature parity between an Android device and your regular operating systems or something, look at the APKs because you're going to learn a lot about how things actually work.
Yeah, I mean, you basically get the source, so it's an easy way to do that. And so once you have the files decompiled, you can load them up into your favorite IDE and search for keywords, like password. And here we have the two files that handle the encryption of the pin into the job password. So we're going to look at jobpassword.class, and here we see the encryption string they use, which is actually the same as what I found doing it by hand. So that's just a confirmation that it's Zoring with PKDE, PKDE, repeating, which is great seed. And a little bit below, we see the actual method for converting the pin into the job password. So the caret there, right in the middle, right before that long string, is for the programmers, people who don't program, which I don't really program that much, so that's the ZOR function. So we know that it's a ZOR and it's ZORing the pin. And not seen there is about 25 lines of code where they're actually taking the hex representation and converting it to, doing some type juggling into a string to give us the hex that we see in the XML. So now that we know how the function works, we can go ahead and write a Python script. And I will not show you the code because I am like a modern day Medusa, except instead of turning people to stone, developers just cry uncontrollably when they see my Python code. And I don't want to inflict that on people. But we can also show that we can take a pin, convert it into the job password format, and then take the job password format and recover the pin from that. So yay. But what can we do with these pins now that we've recovered them?
A whole bunch of stuff. So at this point, we've done our print job, we've captured it, we've realized in the wire there's an interesting little value that says job password. We have a Python file that we can decrypt all those pins. So if you can get a foothold and you can just copy, you can start capturing everybody's print jobs with that pin value, run it to the Python file, we have the pin. But what can you do with the pin? And the first one, totally obvious. Now you just go walk to that printer, you enter the pin, you grab the job, and you walk away. I've learned, I don't know if this is a common thing, but I've learned that people will I kid you not, they will print on a Monday and they won't print their job up until Friday. They'll print on a Friday and they'll expect it to somehow be there on a Monday. I print my stuff and I walk right there and I get it. So your time window to grab the job now that you have their pin is interesting. But the reality is when we learn to do this, I kind of just casually walked around my department and asked people, I was like, hey, do you guys use secure print? Yeah. Is your pin the same as your debit card or credit card pin? Maybe. And no one straight up was like, yes, but yeah. So PIN verification systems are very common now, right? Even if you call your bank or whatever, what's the PIN on the account? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not my PIN, so don't try it. But the point is now, not only do we have a method of just grabbing their print job from the printer, but we have a way of figuring, building a database of very common pins. And spoiler alert, 1, 2, 3, 4 is a very common pin. But one thing I wanted to point out is that very top one, and note about this. So when we started changing the pins and then reprinting the same job and looking at what was in the packet capture, we learned an interesting thing, and that was that nothing else changes in the packets. The only thing that changed was that password value, which was interesting because we were all under the assumption that somehow that password, it's got to do more. It's got to have some influence on that print job. It's got to be encrypting it or something. Yeah, it doesn't. That secure print pin is there no other reason than just to release the job. So we looked a little closer and we realized that what else is in the packet, standard print job, this one was like 6,000 packets, ripping it or putting it together. You've got all the metadata, which got your pin, and then you have this. This is basically, it's just a PCL encoded print job. That's all that's there. I mean, that might sound like a no-brainer, but that's all that's in it. So the point here is that if you've achieved a foothold in an environment, which is really easy to do. We'll show you in the next set of slides, where you can rip out people's print jobs and grab their pins. You don't actually need to decrypt their pin anymore and go run to the printer and print it. You can decrypt the print and hang on to it for other use, but you can just grab the entire print job right off the wire, use an off-the-shelf PCL6 decoder, and just view it right here on your laptop. So whatever you're printing, whether it's, I don't know, financial information, HR, discipline letters that I get, never mind. Things like that, someone else could easily have it, and you have absolutely no way of knowing that they've done that. And then at this point, we decided to actually tell somebody about this. And we were like, hey, look at this thing that we could do. We don't know what the risk is. We care. Maybe someone cares, someone doesn't care. Really, the question was, how much do you care that we can do this? And in the first conference call that we had, a really interesting comment was made. And what we said is, they said, well, how are you capturing the print jobs? And we said, oh, we're just running a PCAP on our firewalls, because the firewall sat between my workstation and the printer. And we were doing that because it was convenient. Like, we manage and maintain the entire firewall environment, so why would we build something new? Just log on, run a TCP dump, and be done with it. And one person had said, they said, okay, well, so for someone to actually do this, then they would need to hack this firewall and hack this firewall and hack this firewall and hack this firewall and get to this firewall, and that's really hard to do, so this isn't a non-issue, or this is a non-issue. And, well, no, not at all. We were using the firewalls because it was convenient, but the point is, if you can get physical access to a printer, that's all you need. Physical access to a printer, get to that physical wire, and you can start doing this very, very easily. And one of the greatest places to find multifunction MFDs is at any reception desk. How often have you walked into an organization, even here in Edmonton downtown, you've got the reception desk, person sitting there, and what's behind them? Freaking multifunction printer. So Zoe and I were kind of talking and looking at this and saying, like, what could we do to actually, just realistically, walk into an environment, that we know absolutely nothing about and start enumerating it? And the answer was, bam, that multifunction printer. So our first idea was to buy, what's it called again? The Raspberry Pi. With a whole bunch of adapters. You don't need a whole bunch of adapters, you just need 2. The reason we bought a whole bunch is I can't read spec sheets and I bought all the wrong ones. But we finally found this little guy. So we have one right here if you want to see it later. This is a Hack 5 packet squirrel. So this is ManInTheMiddle for $60 US. Convert to Canadian, ship it up here, $100. $100, anyone here can buy this device. And they're amazing. A little larger than a Toonie, so it works with battery packs. Like this is the power, just USB power plug-in. We all have those on our phones. If you don't have a battery pack, what you do is you come to the U of A campus, you find the people that are doing this in a circle, and they're playing Pokemon Go, and you mug them because they have like 600 battery packs on them. Don't even have to pay for one. Shameless plug, if you play Pokemon Go, come to the U of A. It is the most dense Poke Center, something like in the province, so people come to the university just to play Pokemon Go. And it has 3 modes, PCAP dump, DNS, rewrite, and VPN. You can actually put this on a wire and configure it to rewrite all people's DNS traffic, everything going through there. We use it for PCAP dump. And then we said, hey, why don't we actually do it? So we built I have it here. Someone said it looks like a bomb. It's not a bomb. Standard BSides Las Vegas speaker gift from a couple years ago, just a standard battery pack. USB cable. This is the bottom. I flipped it over. The green thing means it's booting up. And it's right here if you want to see it. So completely portable, fully automated. It's actually powered on right now. I intentionally covered the light so you can't see that. If you were to plug this into anything on campus, there's a multifunction printer right over there. It'll just start ripping all the print jobs. Copies everything. We'll see everything we want to see. So you walk into that environment, you say, hey, I'm the IT guy. I'm here to fix your printer. You reach over, you plug her in, and you're good to go. So you notice anything odd about this printer, other than the fact that it's a printer? No, right? This is standard printer, floor 1. I know some of my coworkers are here. You probably have printed on this thing a few times. And our vendor and I, so our vendor reports to me at the U of A, and we were like, hey, let's take some pictures for this shot. But if you reach behind it, there it is. We just plugged it in. Now, we took this for the presentation. We weren't actually ripping out jobs here. But the funniest thing, I kid you not, we had 2 coworkers walk by us from our server team. And they see, like I'm reaching over, my butt's in the air, and Harvinder's like in there with his camera trying to get the light on so we can get a nice photo. And they know our jobs, and they're just like, oh, is there a security issue with the printer? Like they're God's gift to comedy. And we were like, yeah, actually, how many of you get that? You walk through the hallway, and everyone's like, how secure is the environment? So I'm like, and you're not talking about my kids or, like, we do more than that. But anywho, so that's that's ripping apart secure prints, ripping apart unencrypted environments, $100 US, awesome stuff. So we're gonna switch it here. I'm doing this work, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when community is not your friend, Thomas Matthews this morning plugged YegSec. YegSec's I wasn't going to plug it, but if he plugged it, I'll plug it. So it's just a local community that started a couple years ago. I think we had almost 200 members as of a few days ago. If you're from Edmonton, you want to get involved in some awesome security stuff, join the freaking group. Community is awesome. It's fantastic. If someone like me can get off my butt on a Sunday afternoon and go to White Ave and meet people, anybody can do it. I remember my wife was like, wait, you're doing what now? Like, you're voluntarily leaving the house to go to White Ave of all places to meet people you've never met before in a bar? Like, that is so out of character for me. And I was there for like 5 hours. I'm like, babe, I found this group of people. They're amazing. Like, they're just like me. I had no idea. And there's a room full of you guys. So community is fantastic, unless it's SNMP community. Then it's absolutely terrible. So if you don't know what SNMP is, it stands for Simple Network Management Protocol. And you can do a lot of stuff with SNMP on printers. So it's mostly used in large environments or small environments, whether you're on printers or network devices, just for monitoring, reporting, sending commands. And when you're at the U of A and you've got like 500, 600 printers or something ridiculous, you don't want to send a person to every single printer every day because they're going to hate their lives and pull stats on it. So we use SNMP to ask the printer questions. Things like, what are your toner levels? What are your print trays? How many people printed this? And it reports back. So that way when someone shows up who manages the printers, they can go, okay, these 3 printers need magenta toner, I'll do that, toner, I'll do that. But the point is, there's a really, 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 really loose security feature. Hey, Randy. Really loose security feature. We'll call it a password. It's called the community string, but it's a password. And if that is not, if what you're sending in your packet is not what's configured on the device, it'll drop it, which is the intended purpose. But if it's not, like the default, so you buy a router from Best Buy and it's got the default password. SNMP is the same thing. A lot of these devices come shipped with defaults. The word is literally public or private. And then, as of like last week, Shodan had over 45,000 devices on it. If you don't know what Shodan is, it's a giant internet search engine for ports and protocols with SNMP listeners. So that's what it is. That's how it works. But let's abuse the hell out of it. So DDoS attacks have, I would say, have had a resurgence in the last 5 years. I'm sure if you go out to this Wander booths, the sponsors there, they'll tell you all about DDoS attacks and how their technology stop it and whatnot. But one of the things that enables DDoS attacks nowadays is something called UDP amplification. So this is an entire talk in itself. I have a whole talk just on NTP amplification because it's awesome. Well, awesome if you're not the guy receiving the packets, and it sucks. But TLDR, UDP amplification is this. It's when you send a really, really, really small request to a device, and it generates an abnormally, but a relatively much larger response back. And we talk about it in terms of ratios. So this is NTP, not SNMP. I think SNMP, depending on what you're doing, can be like 1 to 35 or 1 larger. But NTP is like 1 to 600, which means that if you spoof a packet, first off, UDP you can spoof like crazy because there's no connection orientation there. But with UDP, you send a spoofed address. The spoofed address is your ultimate victim. You send it to all these printers, and you ask the printer a really small question that's going to generate a massive reply. You make sure you use public or private as your community string because odds are they haven't changed it. And what it's going to do, it's going to be like, yeah, this is awesome, and it's going to generate that reply and send it back. And then you end up with a target victim somewhere that's going to get flooded. So with a ratio of 1 to 600, 1 megabit per second request data can generate about 600 megabits per second of reply data, which is maybe not the biggest thing in terms of scale. Throw some zeros on there and we start having problems. So this is why I think Cloudflare was saying that they're mitigating like terabit per second plus DDoS attacks now. And it's not like people are generating a terabit here and throwing it there. No, they're using like a gigabit per second of traffic to generate 600 going this way. So the net result is rip everything. So how this applies to printers, we actually had this. This happened a couple years ago. It came into work, and there's a company called Nuclear Fallout. It's a popular, at least it was, I don't know if they still are. They're European-hosted Counter-Strike servers. They host a lot of the competitive scenes on Battlefield servers and whatnot. And we started getting emails from them quite regularly that were like, hey, all these IP addresses on your network are DDoSing our environments, and it's all SNMP garbage. And when we looked, we were like, they're printers. Like, what the hell? And that was kind of how we got tipped off to this. And so this is not a do slide. This is a don't do slide. So if anyone's taking a picture of this and is like, this is that practical thing Michael talked about when we go back to the environment and you do this, not this slide. This is going to cause you a bad day. So if you don't change your community strings, if you expose your listeners to the internet, and then just go about your day, someone out there is going to find out quite quickly, and good chance your printers are going to start DDoSing the hell out of the planet because that's just what happens. We didn't literally get 500 tickets, but it felt like it at times. And then that actually caused 3 months worth of work, working with some vendors and some people to actually go and change. The easiest thing to do was just block SNMP at the campus perimeter. Many of you guys are probably like, well, why didn't you do that initially? And, well, just politics. We can do that now, but at the time, much more difficult. And that's it. So that's basically how we blow things out of the water with printers.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about how, well, we've talked about how printers are one way, as in we talk to the printers, but we can also make the printers talk back to us. As multifunctions, as in the name, they can do several different things, like scanning. And the scanning functions of multifunction printers, they have their own whole app ecosystem now. Like there's Dropbox for scan through Dropbox and whatnot, but the ones we're going to talk about is scan to folder, and quite often they are misconfigured for on the attacker front. So when we scan to folder, quite often that printer has to have credentials to be able to write to whatever folder it wants to do or wants to write to. Now you can make users enter their credentials to do it so that it has authorization to write to that folder, but a lot of IT people are either lazy or more likely underworked, or understaffed, overworked, and so they may throw high privilege accounts on there, such as domain admin accounts, so that they can write to any folder willy-nilly, don't have to worry about any issues. This is a problem, though, because if we control that printer, and that printer controls high-value credentials,
we got
can
these
essentially,
guys.
oh yeah, by the way, the packet squirrels, they run Responder, and they can catch these authentication attempts right out of the box. They're fantastic. Yeah, we can basically control those creds. So using something like Responder, we can set up an SMB relay server. Using Responder, that's pretty much my go-to as a pen tester. It basically attempts to intercept any, it's a man-in-the-middle tool where it attempts to intercept any sort of authentication attempts and captures that hash. You can also go a little more advanced and relay that authentication attempt, so you don't even have to crack the password. If you do get a hash like that, you can then just take it offline and crack it with Hashcat. I hope your printer passwords are strong, because I have actually gotten DA from a pen test here in town from a multifunction printer that was very loud and had a very weak, very weak password. And this sort of authentication shenanigans is like standard operating procedure for most pen testers, I think. I think it's relatively low noise, so yeah. Also, we don't need to necessarily have a box on the network to be able to relay that to. I can have a responder server set up somewhere on the internet, like maybe on AWS, and I don't know how many organizations here are egress filtering port 445, but I would highly recommend it because tons, from a pen tester's point of view, SMB and getting SMB hashes are, there's tons of ways that we do it, like through phishing, through all sorts of fun stuff like that. So yeah, watch out for that.
I just realized I've been drinking out of both water bottles. So.
Oh, cool. Well, I trust you.
So I'm not sick. If you're not sick, we're good. All right. All right. So moving forward, using feature X to solve problem X and set up problems Y or Z. So we're doing pretty good on time. This timer says 40 minutes already, which is crazy. Okay, that went fast. So let's actually fix this stuff. The good news is most of this is relatively simple and straightforward to fix. If you're not doing a lot of what's in the next slides, maybe start doing them. So due to the power of the internet, we're going to start using memes to guide us through this part here. So you can break this into 3 areas: physical attacks, remote attacks, and man-in-the-middle attacks. First one being preventing physical attacks. Common scenarios, if you get physical attack, it's game over. And that's true. Your screwdriver becomes the biggest threat at that point. If a person's just going to rip, undo the thing and rip your hard drive out, you've got some problems. So disk encryption, modern INFPs, practically all of them support full-blown disk encryption. Pre-boot security, so if someone were to actually take the drive out, they can't get anything on it. I know of one very competent organization here in the city who actually tested that. They took it out, they sent it away to one of those fancy data recovery places, paid the thousands of dollars, and they were like, we can't do anything with this. Perfect. So if you're not doing full-blown disk encryption, just turn it on. Secondly, disk overwrite's a little different. So disk encryption's great for pre-boot, but once the system is booted and turned on and everything's working correctly, there's a lot of other attacks you can do against data running in memory, some of our network attacks. Disk overwrite is what happens. You can configure that. And you can actually tell your printers, on a schedule every day, week, month, just purge free space and purge memory. Earlier I mentioned how people print on Fridays and pick them up on Mondays. The reason I know that is we had an environment where we actually turned on disk overwrite over the weekend, and we didn't tell anybody. And a bunch of people came and were like, "Where's my print job?" And we were like, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "I sent it on Friday. It's Monday morning. It's not there anymore," because like every Sunday we overwrote things. So that's a simple communications thing. You just be like, "Well, that's what happened, so pick it up on Friday." And they go, "No, I didn't think of that for some reason." Also, spot checks might sound absolutely stupid, but if you want to, just get some steps on your step counter because you're trying to win the departmental, health competition or something, walk around your environment. Who did? Spot checks. Honest to goodness, just look and see what you can find. If you find one of these, you've probably got an issue. We get it at work. Not common, but it does happen. My team will get tickets from people all over campus who are just like, "Hey, I noticed this odd thing." And odd thing is some random thing plugged into a wall. Some of the most interesting stuff we've been involved in has been someone just being like, "That shouldn't be there." And we're like, "No, that really shouldn't." And try to put them somewhere that isn't a public space. I mean, maybe not. That's up to you guys. Preventing remote attacks. So this is, I got some water here. So SNMP v3 is actually a thing. The whole idea with community strings, I'm pretty sure that's a v2 thing. v3 is a much better version of the protocol. Printers support it, use that instead, and all these issues kind of go away. TLS on your management interfaces. This one I always find fascinating. You buy a printer, you set it up, the first thing they do is they enable encryption on the management interface because heaven forbid someone intercept the password that we use to manage the printer, and then they don't care about the actual data being sent to the printer. No, that's all plain text and whatnot. But do it anyways. Obviously strong passwords. Printers actually have firewalls. Access control is built right onto them. You can say only these addresses can manage me, we're good to go. CA certs, unicast reverse path forwarding. That's not something you do on your printer, you do that on your routers if it supports it. So I don't want people to spend the next 6 days being like, how do I implement unicast RPF on my printer? That's a router thing, but it's used for anti-spoofing. There's different versions, but like a strict version of it, the router will actually check. It gets a packet from an interface and it checks its routing table. And it basically says, if I did not receive that packet on the same interface that I would send the response out of, drop it. Works really well for anti-spoofing. If you're a large enterprise, asymmetric routing might cause some problems. So do your research first. Don't just be like, hey, Michael said at BSides to turn this on, turn it on, and watch your network completely die. But it is definitely something to look at. And the last thing here, preventing ManITM. So basically how to make these things not work anymore. There's 3 things you can do in order of what I would say paranoia. So a lot of modern printers now have encrypted print set right up into them. Actual encrypted print, not secure wannabe print. And in the implementation we were looking at, what it does is it still leaves all the metadata plain text. It will still leave, like you can still recover password prints or whatever, the passcodes out of them. But what it will do is it will actually encrypt the PCL6 data itself. So that's how much risk do you want to accept. I would definitely recommend doing that because it makes grabbing the actual print job itself much harder. I think perhaps in the future that was something we were gonna look at that. So maybe next year, year before, we'll be like, hey, by the way, you managed to break that too. The next one, TLS print, you can just do straight up wrap all your traffic in TLS, SSL. And then last one is IPsec. You can do IPsec. I've never actually seen an environment set it up. The vendor we worked with was like, we only know of one vendor in the States, they wouldn't say who it was, but you can take a few guesses, who actually does full-blown IPsec for all their print environments, because you can do authentication as well. So,
just one more thing as well. I forgot to mention before, instead of having them scan to folder and whatnot, use scan to email. That way you don't have to have any creds on there except for maybe a low-level email account, and you don't have to worry about writing to any folders, and that's just knocks out a whole huge thing.
Right, that's a valid point. And then the other to add on to that too was a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll hard code the creds into the printer just for usability. But really, you can also talk to your users and have them enter their credentials, and you don't have to store anything. So that's kind of what we have. That's the presentation. I do want to say special thanks to 2 people. Well, one person, a whole bunch of you. So first to Kirk. Kirk is here. He's the guy with the shorts on today. Probably the only person with the shorts on. So Kirk reports to me at the university. He's on our team. Kirk actually played a huge role in this. It wasn't just the Mike and Zoe show. It was the Mike, Kirk, and Zoe tri-show. but Kirk didn't want to present, so we said, screw it, we'll do it, and we'll just we'll point you out because we know how much you love the spotlight being on you. And then to the rest of you, thanks for attending. Hopefully this was interesting and informative. Yeah, it's printers, but we tried to make it a little bit interesting, and so open up to Q&A in a second. If you need to get a hold of us, that's how you can get a hold of us. Yeah, email me at the university, say what you want to say. Zoe's on Twitter, I'm not, LinkedIn. And the ISACA stuff, if you're not in ISACA, you want to join, great. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me for like not university stuff is just a DM on there. So talk to lots of people, we can hook you up with that. And